Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Top 5 Business Use Cases for Deltek Harmony and Dela AI, presented by Neosystems. I'm Don Carnevale, Director of Marketing at Neosystems, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can enter them into the Q&A area within Zoom. We will have some time at the end of the presentation to answer your questions. Also, we will make the webinar recording and presentation slides available to all registrants in the coming days. For over 20 years, Neosystems has been a leading provider of back office and professional services for government contractors, including outsourced accounting, finance, payroll, HR, systems integration, reporting and analytics, hosting, IT, and information security, including CMMC compliance. We're fortunate to have two Costpoint experts with us today, Susan Mitchell, President and Chief Services Officer, and Tafiq Habibi, Vice President of Professional Services for AI and BI. Here's a quick look at our agenda. We'll begin with an introduction to Deltek Harmony and Dela AI. We'll then look at how to accelerate approvals, how to enhance collaboration across teams, and how to empower smarter decision-making across your organization. We'll also look at streamlining the financial close process and finish up with a look at the modern UX. Now I'd like to introduce the host for today's discussion, Susan Mitchell from Neosystems. Susan?
Thank you, Don. Hi, everybody. I'm Susan Mitchell. If you don't know me already, it's nice to meet everyone. So what we're going to talk about today is one of my favorite topics, which is Deltek Harmony and Dela. So just to, for those that may have not heard or, are new to this whole topic or anything like that. So I just want to, kind of lay the foundation. So Harmony is basically the new user interface for Costpoint. We'll talk more about it, but I personally like it because it's a lot less clicks. It's, much more intuitive. And then also we're going to talk about Dela. So for those that, have not, again, have not heard about this or anything like that, Dela is basically, it's the, AI agents that can automate manual tasks like timesheet entry, expense creation, basically frees up your team, makes things go faster. Like one of the examples I like to use is being able to say, like an AP person, if they need to check when like has a vendor been paid, they can, ask like, what is this invoice, has this invoice been paid? And they can get the information back. Customizable Ask Dela. So you can basically put in your company's own documentation. So if you had something like, say, a chart of accounts with a description of what types of costs go to that, to that account, you could load that into Dela. You can load that in, and then that would make Dela that much smarter. And then smart summaries. So quick insights into project health. There's little like icons where you can click and say, it'll say smart summary, and then it'll give you like various statistics and, various insights on, from things on that screen. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tafiq, who here at Neosystems, he has been doing a lot of our AI and all of those fun things. So I'm going to hand it over to Tafiq to talk about our next topic.
Thank you, Susan. And good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm just going to do a couple of slides here related to some of the AI-powered stuff. And the first one we're going to talk about is the AI-powered journal entry approvals. This was new in version 2025.4. It is basically an AI-assisted AJE approval process. And you can basically use Dela to auto-approve routine adjusting journal entries. Dela can actually automatically approve those or can make recommendations for approval or flag them for exceptions so that you can take a deeper dive into those. With the idea, of course, being that it accelerates workflows and improves efficiency. And I just have a couple of screenshots here of the settings that you have to do, and they're also in the notes of this slide deck. but you have to actually configure your general ledger to allow Dela. And then you have to configure your general ledger for the approval. You'll notice here that you're allowing Dela to do approval for adjusting journal entries. And then there's also the field for the confidence level, which you can set to see how confident Dela has to match. So if you put that at 100%, that every piece of that journal entry has to match for Dela to automatically approve it. If you reduce that confidence level, then Dela may not approve, but will make recommendations or handle exceptions accordingly. And then you can set the approval modes by individual folks who are responsible for journal entries as well. One thing to note for the AI-powered journal entry approvals is the volume of your historical data will have an impact, especially initially when you enable this capability, since Dela is going to use your data for machine learning to actually train herself, I guess if I can say herself, to basically
Itself.
be able to make decisions for you. So anyway, my recommendation there is to just pay attention to that piece of it. Take a look at the documentation on the Deltek side, the site for more information on that. And then
And
go ahead.
I was going to say the one thing I would just kind of add in for any users that are, kind of if you're new to Deltek and you're implementing and things like that, that volume of historical data is going to play a large impact on how this is going to work for you, like right off the bat. So if you don't have a lot of journal entries that you've entered thus far or something like that, it might take it a little bit to kind of learn that. So when Tafiq's talking about machine learning and things like that, it's it's going to exactly that. It's going to learn as you progress. So if it didn't work today, but you get 3 months down the road and say you had 3 months close, under your belt, and then you had these journal entries that you were doing, it's most likely then going to start returning that information. So so the moral of that story is if the query, like if it doesn't work the first time, again, as it gets more data and things like that, it will change. So keep checking back, on some of those. Sorry, Tafiq, go ahead.
No, no, it's good. It's good. And along the same lines of the journal entry approvals, there's also, next slide, please, Don. There's also the AI-powered accounts payable approvals. Those were made available in 2025.3 in combination with Dela and intelligent character recognition. You can basically automatically create AP vouchers, and then those AP vouchers can automatically also be approved, or Dela can make recommendations for approval, or flag them for manual processing. And it basically follows the same logic. You have to go configure your AP voucher settings and allow Dela approvals. And then you can go into the accounts payable Dela machine learning user settings and designate the folks that are approving these AP vouchers, and whether you want them to be able to make recommendations, or you want to enforce approvals or disable them, all in all. Just a couple of things to note related to this area. Unposted vouchers must be posted before enabling Dela approval, typically before you make any changes to those settings, and make sure you don't have any open vouchers. And then again, the same logic here for machine learning applies. The volume of historical data will have an impact on that as well. Next slide, please. All right. And then Costpoint released, or Deltek released a Costpoint Microsoft Teams application late last year as well. This is an application that you can install on your Microsoft Teams instance and works within that. It also has Dela integrated into that, so you basically interact with it through the chat just like any other user. You can ask questions and make inquiries. You can enter, sign, and approve time. You can approve or reject workflows in the system. You can receive notifications for certain events. And then you can ask Dela any questions that you would ask from the front end of Costpoint. You can do that through your Microsoft Teams chat window as well. This has implications from a corporate standpoint. There's an interactive email feature here that relies on adaptive cart technology that's coming from Microsoft. And if your Microsoft 365 instance is on GCC High, the platform will not support these adaptive cards, and the feature would be unavailable as well. So there could be some IT related implications here to rolling out this application in Microsoft Teams.
And Tafiq, I will add one other thing on that. So in some cases, because a lot of people will come back and ask questions, like that their IT group, said that they couldn't, do this or something like that. In some cases, it could be that, like in many government contractors right now, they have, various IT controls and everything because of CMMC and all of that. So in some cases, it might be that you need to understand from your IT group what their change management process is for allowing a new application to be accessed or something. So what I would say on, the Teams interface or, the Outlook interface, any of that stuff, you need to work closely with your IT group on those just to understand, what you can and cannot do. So next slide.
All right. So this will take us to the Ask Dela. And the first question I would ask is, what can you do? So when you open up the chat window with Dela, you can ask her what you can do, and you'll get a series of potential questions that you can ask. I'm not going to go down this whole complete list here because it's not a comprehensive list. These are just a bunch of examples. Judging by the time I've spent the last few days here interacting with Dela, there's quite a bit of questions that you could ask and potentially get answers for. I'll show you some examples here, starting with the next slides, but I will share with you, go ahead, Don. I will share with you some important things to keep in mind as you interact with Dela. First off, you must have the appropriate access to that module or application you're inquiring about. So Dela's responses may seem cryptic, but access is usually the first place to investigate. So if you're looking, for example, on information on manufacturing orders or inventory, you must have access to the appropriate module. That's typically the first place you need to go look for if you're expecting to get answers from that interaction. You might have to try different variations of your questions, sometimes with more specificity. So if you don't get the right answer or the expected answer the first time, try to vary it a little bit here by adding a little bit more detail. Please be sure to pay attention to your context. So you typically would want to start a new chat if you are changing the subject of your inquiry. So for example, if I'm asking about employees and employee data, and then I want to switch to inquire about inventory, for example, that would be a change in the context, and you would close that window and start with the new chat window to actually switch that context. Keep in mind that Dela is still learning about aggregate related questions. So for example, if you ask Dela about what was my revenue for 2026 or 2025, you probably will not get an answer. So anything that's typically related to aggregation and things like that are still a work in progress. And along those lines, keep in mind that Dela is still evolving. Questions that are not answered today might be answered tomorrow. So I think as Dela learns more with machine learning, as more data becomes more accessible, as new releases get released, some of those questions might be answered in the future. And then lastly, you'll see this disclaimer with any kind of AI generative agent. Keep an eye out for hallucinations. Sometimes you might get some really, really strange answers. So keep an eye out. Today, when it comes to AI, usually it's trust but verify. Make sure that the expected results are what you expect them to be. Susan, anything to add here?
No, just continue on.
Yep. All right. So just a couple of examples here. Just wanted to show you, again, there's an infinite amount of questions that you can ask, but I just wanted to show you a few examples here. I asked Dela here to list purchase orders that are $5,000 or more. And within a couple of seconds, I got a response back telling me that here are the first 10, but we do have more than 10 that are $5,000 or more. And then I got a link to the purchase order screen that is already pre-filtered for those purchase orders that are over $5,000. Next slide, please. Okay. And then staying within the same context, I asked Dela to narrow the list down to purchase orders that are over 80,000. And I still got 10 more POs here. Those are the ones that are over $80,000. And then I got a link to the purchase order screen again with that list pre-filtered there. And if we keep going to the next slide, again, within the same context, now I asked Dela to only show me POs that have an open status. And I still got a list of 10 POs that have open status. And I also got a link with purchase orders that have open status. And I just wanted to show you on the screenshot on the right that Dela is automatically filtering my query window for me. So this is something that Dela actually did. She did PO total amount greater than 80,000 and the open status or the PO status is equal to open. So she's actually doing and completing those tasks behind the scenes without having to query the windows. Next slide, please. All right. And then this is something that Susan mentioned with Dela, the smart summaries that are peppered everywhere. In this particular scenario, I asked Dela about Linda Carr's employee ID, and I got a response back with that employee ID. I also got a link to the Manage Employee Information screen that was filtered for Linda. And when I opened that Manage Employee Information screen, there was a button for the Smart Summary on the bottom right. And once you click that, Dela will generate an employee summary, give you some demographic information related to things like hire date, next review date, how many holiday hours and sick leave and vacation leave has been accrued with those balances as well. And you'll find those peppered throughout, obviously, Costpoint. I just wanted to give you an example of this here. Next slide, please. All right. And then you can ask also sorts of questions. Again, I changed the context here. I asked Dela about the direct projects that I have. And then I asked how many of those are active. I got a response back for 67 direct projects. And out of those, I wanted to find out how many were T&M. And then as you can see in the screenshots, as I get the responses and I explored there, you'll see that my query windows, again, from the project user flow are being filtered automatically by Dela as I ask those questions. That query window is being updated behind the scenes as well. So you'll see the one on the right, project classification is direct, the active flag is checked, and the project type is T&M. And so all of that is happening behind the scenes, and I'm just getting the answers on the front end. Next slide, please. A few more questions here. I asked how many sales orders are currently in pending status. As you can see, I got a response back that there is one with a link to the pending sales orders count query window. I asked for details on my part 5102 10300, and I got the details for that part on the right-hand side screenshot, whether the item is active, whether I make it or buy it, whether it's required or not. And then I also asked Dela to give me a list of the parts that I typically buy, and I got a list of those items. I got the first 10, and then I got a link for my parts list as well that is already filtered. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over to Susan now to talk about the closing manager.
Excellent. And I will just add on the Dela, I will tell all of you, there's a few things with that before we leave the Dela discussion. So what I would say is definitely like with, all the, new things that are coming out, like with the Deltek MRs and everything, stay up on your, like on what's coming new in your next MR, because there's a lot of good features and things that are, that come out each time. And the other thing I would say is, remember with Dela, like go in and play with it. Like go in and test it out. If you haven't gone in and done that yet, I strongly encourage you to do that and go in and start asking, ask it questions like, because it, as Tafik mentioned, it will learn as you ask it questions and as, things, as you continue to do that. So like I said, I find it to be very helpful. And again, for some of the things like I mentioned, about the AP and the check and stuff like that, it's very nice for answering those quick questions without having to go click through the screens and go to the voucher history or go to the vendor history and go look up the invoice number and go click on all of the subtasks and stuff. So it definitely can be a time saver for your team. So in regards to our next topic, so the closing manager, which some of you I think have heard me talk about this in previous webinars and things like that. But this one, I was very excited when Deltek put this in, because for those of us that are accountants by trade, which I am, I was very excited about this because how many of you have had the 100-line document that gets sent out before each close that has to be manually updated with all the steps and everything like that? And then you have to have emails where you're going through and going, oh, did this person finish their stuff, or, that kind of thing. So the closing manager helps keep all of that together and helps with the processing and running of that. So essentially what you do is in Costpoint now, there is a closing plan that you can create that includes the tasks that are inside and outside of Costpoint. So if you have to get inputs, say from your project managers or something like that, and that's one line on your closing schedule, you can actually have a line in there that's your closing schedule line that says inputs from project managers. And if you have those the role code and everything set up for project managers, it can notify those project managers, hey, you're up. We need inputs, that kind of thing. So again, it's taken that closing process and it's automating a lot of it for us. So you can add in manual tasks. So like on that topic for reconciliations, approvals, creation of journal entries, EAC updates, etc. So you can basically put all of those things in your closing list. You can assign the resources to tasks, so you can and schedule days for performance. So even if you have say you do something 2 days before the last day of the month or 2 days before your the month ends, like an example might be that all accounts payable invoices should be submitted to AP by 2 days before the last day of the month or something, because you need AP to have time to process those, right? So you can put those lines in your closing schedule. You can set dates, sets date for completed and user who completed. So it's tracking that as well. So once somebody is done, it's going to put the date that they completed the action and everything like that. Close. So each period, so you can basically, it has your closing. Once you set up your closing template, you can essentially each month, you can create a new, kind of month close calendar. So if you needed to make a change, or if the dates are changing or something like that, it's going to update that based on your template that you have done and when you put in your start date of your close. You can query and report on completion progress using BI reports and dashboards. So I don't know how many of you on this phone call has had your CFO come to you and say, where are we with close? Where are we? What's going on? That's a chronic question that I know many of you have had. So this will allow you could even have have a dashboard for the CFO to see where they are in the closing process. Exactly. And if something's gotten held up or if there's a problem or anything like that, it gives everyone insight as to where you are in the closing process. Use Dela to create new, update, or view tasks on your closing plan. So we talked a little bit, about that, but again, this is one of the things with the Teams app where you can go in and you could view where are you with that, where are you with the closing plan, or what task, is coming up and that kind of thing. So in 2025.4, there was a thing that was also added called the auto run closing plan application. So if a task is in the closing plan and has a scheduled job linked and the auto flag is checked, it will auto run, it will kick off the job when it's in ready status where predecessors have been completed. So what that means is so a lot of you will have those processes that we all run. So usually we'll collect all of our direct costs. We post our timesheets, we post our accounts payable, we get all of our direct costs in there, and then we kick off that process that, update compute burden, load labor rates, like it's our first revenue compute, like it's that kind of first time that we see all of the data for the month. And a lot of people will have that in a job where, it's just going to automatically run. So what the closing manager, the auto run closing plan will do is that when the closing process gets to that point and the previous tasks have been done, so like in the case I was just talking about, if I had post time sheets and um, like AP had to be, posted and all of that, once those tasks have been performed, it is going to update, it's going to run the processes like to run those other things that are in that job. So instead of you having to schedule it for a specific time, which those of us that have ever closed a month will know, sometimes the schedule doesn't go exactly, as you planned, or sometimes you're running faster, which is fantastic. But what this will do is it will kick off that process once it gets to that point. And then it will send the initiator, like you can get the email once the process is complete. So that is, again, I was so excited when I saw this functionality. Okay, next slide, Dawn. Okay, so then in regards to the close plan, so this is the closing plan. So what you'll see here is you have task categories that you can assign. So if you have, say, like it's the labor team that's going to be doing those, or it's the AP team or the GL, so you can categorize the tasks, or if it's ops, that's another one. Like ops might dart in there, with some inputs or something that they need periodically. So you can put that in. You can put your task name, your and sorry, I'm like the instructions. So that's another thing that a lot of clients, like when we're doing implementations and everything, and someone is new to Costpoint and they're trying to get acclimated and everything, and they'll ask the question, what does this mean? Like, what is this task? Or even employee turnover, right? Like if you have employee turnover and you have somebody new that starts a position, you can put in instructions. So it can tell them, give them an idea of what the expectation is of that task, of what they're supposed to be doing. The other thing is you can put a prioritization. So again, like posting labor, like that's a high priority. So if you're a services-based government contractor, until you post labor, you're not really going to be doing much for close, right? So that's a high priority task, right? So you can kind of like say, like you can prioritize these. The other thing is that you can put the closing day. So you'll see here how we have like day 0, day -2, like, the various ones. And then you can also have that it can put in the start date. So if you want specific start dates to be in there, you can have a start date, and then it will have, an end date that you can put in. Um, it will ultimately have that. And then you'll have the status. So again, you can see the status. If there's dependencies, you can say that this task is dependent upon this other task. You can say who the assigned user is to do that task. So that's, again, it's like your closing calendar, but it's in Costpoint. Next slide, please, Dawn. And then, so the other item that you can do is you can say like the application name. So if it's a posting task, or if it's, like where are you doing this task, you can put the application name in there so that, the like where the task is to be performed. And then you can link a job, like a job to that line. So that's where I was talking a little bit about if you have a closing process that you run at a certain point in time, once you've gotten through certain steps, You can put that in your closing plan and it will kick that off once the earlier sequenced items have been done. Next slide, please. Oh, I think I might actually have my slide in twice, but just to go back to this really quick. So it will actually put the link in the application ID. So you will see the specific, like if the user, link clicks on that, it will take them to the specific screen that they're supposed to be working on. And then in here, you'll also see how we have like a post journal entries job that's set up. So that job is set up to post the journal entries once everything else before it has been done. So if there's any journal entries that have been approved, that like the approvals are in, a process that things have to be approved to be posted, then it would post the approved journal entries. Next slide. And then the last one on the closing plan. So this is, you get notified when the processes are complete. So if basically it will tell you like when any of the job queues or any of the things are done, that's basically saying that you're going to get notified when it's done. Next slide. Okay, so moving on from the closing plan. When we go, we're going to talk a little bit about the Harmony interface, so basically the new, user interface and everything like that. And it's done, so just so everyone knows, and I'm a longtime Costpoint user, I think I've been using Costpoint for 25 years. We get a little set in our ways. That's what I'll tell you. New UIs, you're always like, what is it? But what I'll tell you is this one, when we say it boosts productivity, when I first saw that, I was like, well, how does it do that exactly? For me, it's decreasing the clicks. So the number of clicks and the number of things that I had to do to be were like it dramatically decreased that. Can you hear me? Sorry, I got a Zoom error for a second there. It was giving me a message. So basically, it boosts the productivity by, again, decreasing your clicks, and then reduces training time and increases satisfaction. So it's a much friendlier user interface. People can get around much easier. So again, I'm a big fan of it. So Dawn, next slide, please. Okay. So this is kind of the overview. So for those of you that are used to seeing all of your icons and everything at the top, they're basically now to the left and to the right. So your home dashboard favorites and open apps are going to be in that top or left-hand corner. So think of the things like, where if you were used to seeing like how many screens you were in, you can see that's like the fourth one that's down. So it'll tell you like if you have multiple applications open, that's the one, where you can toggle through stuff. Going on down, that next series is the domain and modules. So, us longtime users, we're used to seeing general ledger and projects and people and materials. All of those are there. They're just icons now. And then there's a few, like new things. So if you have like the contracts or planning or any of those kind of things, you're going to have those domains there as well. And then to the right, you have your Ask Dela icon, which has become one of my favorites. You'll have your notifications, and things like that. You'll have your file upload, download. So again, it's everything that was across the top. Your print icons, your setup, your print setup icons, and then your keys. So that little keyboard for those of you that still like to use the control, keys to do things because you move around faster, those are still there. And then the help. So one of the things that I really like about this, the newer the newer versions is that the help menus, so if you're in a screen and you need help, if you click on that, it not only now gives you the help for that screen, but you have options to go look at, things like on the knowledge, basically like in the Deltek learning area, like the learning hub. So you can go find out, you can see videos about what you're trying to do. Basically anything that you're trying to learn about, you can go find it in that help. So use that, if you're struggling or anything like that, use the help. And the other thing is that if you're using Dela, you can ask Dela how to do something. So if you have a new employee or you're new to Costpoint and you're trying to figure out how to do something, you can ask Dela. So if you said, how do I enter an accounts payable voucher? Dela is going to take you to that information, or you can find that on the help. So again, some of my favorite things about the new interface with it. Next slide, Dawn. Okay, so this is just more talking about, kind of the hierarchical structure. So you can see once those icons were expanded, you kind of see how, you have your welcome screen, your dashboard, your open applications, your menu search. So again, all of the same great features that we had before, but they're just, now we access them via the icons. And then if you like, once you go into one, so once you're in a domain and you go into a module, so once you go into accounting, it's going to pull up our drop downs, that we were typically seeing. So where we used to go left would be the domain, the domains. We would click on the domain and go into a module, and then a module would take us over into the screens, right? It's now just basically like an easy, you're there very quickly. It's not as many clicks. Next screen, Dawn. And then the other change, so we used to have we would have the gears, or we would have, like the lightning bolt and things like that. So our actions are basically up in the middle, will be in the middle of the screens, the action tab. And that is where we will go to, print and post. And, basically the things that we used to click on the gears for are now in that actions tab. Next slide, Dawn. And then our action menu. So we still have our abilities to execute, clone, refresh, and save. Those they look a little different. They're going across the top. So when you're in a screen, when you're in an entry screen, those are going to be basically in the middle, in the middle of your screen for you to use. So they're much easier accessible. And as an example, when we talk about things like less clicks, for those that don't may or may not remember, but like to clone something, you would have to go up and go file and then clone and then everything like that. Whereas now it's literally on the screen, you do one click, you go. So again, it's cutting down on a lot of your time clicking through things. Next slide. So this is essentially the applications that we were talking about, or the icons that were on the right, and what each of those means. So I'm not going to spend too much time because I kind of already talked through this. Next slide, please. And then we have our export. So this is our usual print screen that we used to have, where we would go in and we would say what format we wanted to do it, what were our print options, everything like that. All, the same features are there. Again, just they show a little differently with a different, with a basically a checkbox now, or a tab. Next slide. And then this one, I want to point this one out, because for those that, like to look at things side by side and may have been frustrated in the past because they wanted to be able to pull up one screen in Costpoint and then look at another screen in Costpoint, or for those that have multiple screens, right? Like you're one of those people that have two screens or something like that. This now allows you to have the different tabs that are open so that you can do that type of, looking at things. So, and this comes, a lot, my most common example that I usually will think of when when I've been like, oh, I wish I could look at both these screens is like if we're doing a migration of data or something like that, and I want to be able to look at two screens in Costpoint to see, kind of what was going on, um, then this is a fantastic feature that you can use. Next slide. And then this last one, so this one, I again, it's another one for it's helpful for your users. So in in the new UI, so if I, and this is a prime example. So if I'm in the manage project user flow screen and dependent upon my type of business, so say I was a completely service-oriented government contractor. I didn't have any like manufacturing or, anything like that. And, I was never going to use maybe the cost of goods sold screen. I'm just like throwing something out there. But say that like that is not a screen that I'm going to use. I can go in and uncheck that in the subtasks box, and it will not show in that in that area down there. So I don't even have to see it or worry about it or think about it. And this can also be good for if you have teams of people that are doing managed project user flow and you only want a team of people. So say you have billers and they only do like they worry about the billing setup. That's all they're worried about. They're not worried about, the rest of the contract information because contracts is handling that. They're not worried about the rev rec per se, because say, accounting and finance are worrying about that. You could set this so that the billers would only see their information. That's a potential thing that that you could do, or have the other screens that you don't want them to see basically removed. So again, it's a lot of nice things from a user interface perspective where it's making it more simplistic. If there's things where they're like there's 20 subtasks in here, how do I know what to do, right? You can focus them into the ones that they need to be doing and that are important. And as an example, like user defined too. Some people don't even use user defined. You may not even want it to be seen as a subtask on there. So, next slide. So I think this is where we are going to open it up for questions. So if anyone has any questions, I would say let's look at those. Don, do you want to see what questions we have?
Sure, we have a few questions that have come in already, so we'll get to those. And I would encourage everyone else to please enter those questions into the Q&A area. We do have a few minutes now to address those. First question is Dela AI capable of grabbing the expense reports and receipts that are attached in Costpoint corresponding to that expense report? We are in billing and have to go to AP tables to grab the attached receipts.
So there's a few things I'm thinking of on that to automate that process. So on a lot of these, so you should be able, yes, you should be able to have it find those receipts. The other thing that I would say as well is if you're using if you're using like content management or any of those types of things where those receipts, and actually I'm thinking more AP, it should be able to pull the receipts. But what I was going to say about content management is if you're using content management, you can have it put specific, oh, and I'm trying to remember what they're called, but they're basically like data attributes on the metadata. That's what it is. Like on those attachments, so that when you need to basically find any attachments and stuff like that, you can basically query those very quickly in the SharePoint application. And And I was going to say, I feel like there is additional functionality on this specific one, but I would say who asked that? Because I would like to follow, I need to follow up on that one for them.
Farouk Murtaza.
Okay. Farouk, I will follow up with you on that. Next question.
Sure. Next question. Have you heard from Deltek clients that they encounter roadblocks with their independent financial auditors when trying to implement some of the automated processes? If so, do you have examples of successful responses or explanations or data from Deltek that can be provided to external auditors or others to reassure that controls remain in place and that the human is still in the loop?
So, so there's a few things that I would say to that. So, with any financial system, you're going to have, like with any set of controls,
Audits.
you should have preventive controls and detective controls, right? So, your preventive, so your automated, AP approval is based on certain, metrics and things or certain information that's already in the system. So if you have a very low threshold for, how like what you want to allow through, that when Tafik was going over the thing that said, like what's the percentage or, how much does it have to be exact? Does it have to match and everything? You would have a very low threshold there. The other thing I would say about that, and I'd have to think about specific language, to auditors because I have not actually come across that one yet. But the other thing I would say is that you should have detective controls that if something, you should be looking at, say, like let's take an AP voucher. So an AP voucher comes through for $100,000 and it goes to the AI, for whatever reason, it goes to the wrong like project, everything like that. When you're reviewing your projects, like you should be reviewing your projects. That's one control that should, like alert you that there is something that was not correct. The other thing is that you should be looking at like if the account was wrong or something like that, it should be again, there are other controls that should be along the process where you should be seeing some of those. And again, I caution when when you're looking at these things and everything, everything like that, test them out. Always test. I cannot emphasize like, before when you're any new function in a software application, you're going to want to test the functionality to see how it works and how it actually does things. Next question.
Okay, next question. When we close, one of the steps is for the system administrator to submit a job to the queue to run a process. If we were to add that to the closing manager close plan screen, would it work if no one in the closing plan has access to the submit job to queue screen?
I'll have to check on that one actually. I'll have to check on that one because I have not tried it with someone that does not have access to the job screen. Sorry, I'm making it. Okay.
Okay, another
Sorry, I'm laughing
question.
at Michelle's. Go ahead.
No question we have is I noticed in this new interface, it's missing the system control that requires a preview of a journal, example, revenue, cash, journal entries, etc., prior to posting. A user can just post. Is there a setting we are missing, or is this by design?
So, so typically you can print like because it used to be that there was a print like there were separate ones, but you should still be able to print in those screens the journal entry before you post it, or the posting journal before you post it. So that would be what I would say on that one is that I believe that it's going to force you to print before you post. So it's a separate, like they are separate. Any other questions? Interesting. So Michelle, what I would say is let me double check on this one.
Okay, we'll do one final call for questions here. If anyone has those, please go ahead and enter those in the Q&A area. All right, it appears that there are no more questions. So that will conclude today's webinar. I want to thank everyone for attending today, giving us some of your time to review this important subject. Certainly want to thank Susan and Tafik for their time, for presenting some great information to our audience. As I mentioned early on in the webinar, we will be following up with everyone who registered to provide a link to the webinar recording and the presentation slides. So please keep an eye out for that. And please keep an eye out for invitations to other Costpoint related webinars coming up in the near future. So again, thank you for your time and have a great day. Goodbye.